See all of you here, and Lisa has introduced me, and I'm going to be introducing somebody who I think needs no introduction. But for those of you who are here, and I know many of you are looking for a book, well, the book is currently out of stock, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about this book that I have also just finished reading, and it's a captivating story, because Fawzia and myself are not that different in age. We are both single mother of two, and both writers. But other than that, everything else about my life and her life is pretty much different. You will find out when you read the book. I think, can I get a show of hands? How many of you here have read her book, The Favoured Daughter? Okay, quite a few of you, okay. And how many of you were here yesterday at the snow event where she spoke as well? Okay, so I think most of you will have a lot of questions for her today, and I guess she will be taking a lot of questions as well. Just very briefly, she is the 19th daughter of her father. Her father has had 7 wives, I think if I'm not wrong, and because she's one of the daughters that were, I suppose, unwanted, she was left in the sun to die when she was a baby. But other than that, you know, she has gone through in Afghanistan the Russian occupation. She's gone through the Mujahideen, where she lost her father, she lost her brother, who was brutally killed, and eventually the Taliban, when they came into Kabul, and a lot of changes went through Afghanistan at that time. So you may have a lot of questions for her later, especially with the rights of women in Afghanistan during those years. But other than that, also she is an amazing woman, because to me, she is a woman of many firsts. She was the first girl in her family to be educated. She's also the first in her family to be a politician. And it's very interesting because she had to fight, almost fight against her brother to represent the Koofi family, because her father is a politician, her grandfather was also a politician. So I guess it was one of the things that I think the most interesting thing was that she almost had to get her brothers to sign on paper that she was to represent the family, because she was a woman. And also if she is, and if she wins the presidential election in 2014, she will be the first female president of Afghanistan. And I think that is something that is really, truly remarkable. And just join me, of course, to welcome the very inspiring and courageous Fawzia Koofi. It's very interesting too that we are in the old Parliament House, because you are a parliamentarian in Afghanistan. But first of all, I guess where I had a conversation with my boys this morning about you and about the book. Like Fawzia, I'm also a single mother of 2, and in her book, she begins, it includes many letters to your daughters, and in a previous interview, it was mentioned that they were almost like farewell letters of sorts. How do you cope as a mother with the possibility that you could be killed at any time, and leaving behind 2 daughters who see you as the world?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you and other colleagues who gave me this opportunity to... Is it working? It's not, I can't get it. Is it working? Yeah, yes. Okay. I would like to thank those who gave me this opportunity and for the nice introduction. I'm very delighted to be in this Parliament House, especially with very young also audience. Thank you so much for coming over. As I put in my book, for me and other women politicians, it's everyday life with death threats. But for me, it's more because I have been more outspoken against extremism and Taliban. And one of the reasons that I've been outspoken is because I felt the pain of being discriminated during Taliban time myself. I have seen it. I have seen how brutally they were torturing women, but also men. For a woman to be able to do basic things, go to school, basic rights, go to see a doctor when she was in need, she was deprived of all of that. Even for her, her choice of clothing was taken away from her. They had to tell you how to wear your clothes and your socks in the market. So whatever I have experienced in my surroundings during Taliban, but as a woman since the time I was born, how many people were unhappy because there was a girl born in the family, including my mother, who didn't want to see yet another girl to suffer as much as she suffered in her life as a woman, and to be discriminated as much as she, as a woman, was discriminated. So all of this life gave us, women of Afghanistan, the determination and the strength to stand against it. And for that reason, I have become more vocal in my statements and speeches against Taliban, and therefore they certainly don't like me, and they don't like many other women like me. I think by killing and by creating security problems for women activists, which recently before I come here, there was another woman police officer that was killed. What they want to achieve is they want to silence this woman movement. They don't know that they cannot silence. They in fact gave us more power. They gave us more commitment. They gave us more reason to stand. So any attack they make against me, or any time that they are successful to kill a woman activist, we find more reasons, we find more determination to stand in our, and sometimes I become happy because that means we have been, the whole world is fighting the Taliban, and still Taliban are there, but because our voices will be so strong against them, they try to kill us, because sometimes they feel like they're weak, that they want to kill women and women politicians. So with all the threats, I think what we would like to achieve is a world free of discrimination. And Afghanistan where everybody is respected as a human being.
Well, it's okay. It's, hello? Testing. Okay. Can you hear me if I don't use the mic? Can you hear me? Okay, so I don't know if it's working. It's okay. Whoa. Hello?
Okay, in Afghanistan, of course, when we talk about violence against women, for example, the violence is not just an external violence. Violence also happens within the families, domestic violence. I think in the book you talked about instances where your father beat your mother, and within families it is acceptable because it's part of love and ownership. Right, and how do you then see a change in terms of mindset when these are so deep-seated, even to the level of families and couples?
That's true that violence has very deep roots into our culture and society, especially in other parts of the world, in the third world countries, in South Asia in particular. Afghanistan is one of the hugely traditional countries. Among very few countries that have not opened to the world, one of that is Afghanistan. And for men, if they would like to really be respected as a religious person, they feel that they should bring more oppression on the woman. That's one of the means of power, you know. If women become free, they think they're losing power. And that starts from the family, it goes to the politics, it goes to the communities. Although it's changing, Afghanistan is in a transformation. First generation, my mother's generation is absolutely different from my generation. My mother was illiterate. She was the second wife out of 7 wives. But yet she was very strong. As I put in my book, she's like my role model because with all of the problems, with all of the difficult life she had, she was always happy. I managed to go to school, and my mother helped me to go to school and get education and find my way and get somehow liberty on what I wanted to do. My daughters are different from my generation. For me, the struggle was to go to school. So for me, life was like to survive. But my daughters have a choice of living, how they want to live, and what school they want to go. They have social accounts, Facebook and Twitter. and they sometimes promote my messages also on the social networks. Some things that I didn't know when, I was going to school under a lot of pressure. If my brothers were happy, I could go to school. So that's like a generation's change. It's not a common progress. All over Afghanistan has not progressed really. There are problems. There are provinces that still women ears and nose are being cut for not agreeing to marry somebody. Still in many parts of Afghanistan, in some villages, women and girls don't go to school, in majority parts of Afghanistan. But I think that transformed part of Afghan society, which are young generation women, they have dominated media, they have dominated the politics. Hopefully they will dominate the politics, but they are very strong in voices in the politics. So I have the right to claim myself that we represent this transformed part of Afghan society.
Okay, I know definitely as we're listening to her, you probably have a lot of questions. We'll be opening, of course, that to the floor later, so if you have any questions, do scribble them down so that we can ask Fawzia in a while. Of course, I think one of the things that struck me about both the book and about reading about your life as well as your political journey is the word change and transformation within Afghanistan. And I think one of the reasons you wrote the book, I'm guessing, would be that you want to also change perceptions of Afghanistan and of Afghan women. What would be the sort of perceptions that you most want to change about Afghanistan and women?
It's true. There were two objectives that I wanted to write the book. The first one was that we have been hearing, perhaps everywhere you hear about women's problems, you see an Afghan woman with burqa, either the photo or the film, or you see the sign of Afghan woman connected with being poor and unable to do things, being marginalized. But that is one angle you hear. The other angle of Afghan woman life is that they are poor in a way that they don't have access to economic resources, but they are strong inside. They are resilient. They have demonstrated great amount of resilience over the past decades of war and conflict. Most of the women lost their husbands or brothers during war, but they're the supporters of the family. They are not educated. They don't have an income, but they still support the family. They live in a very, very difficult situation, some of them. Like my mother was an example, who used to live in a multi-kind of married house, but she was still regarded as a deputy of my father. So she was still strong in her passion and leadership. So by telling my personal story, I wanted to let the world know that women of Afghanistan are just not poor. I don't want this word of poor to be used anymore, to be annexed with Afghan woman or with any woman, because we're strong. The second message I wanted to gain by writing the book was, perhaps many of you, when you talk about Afghanistan, the first thing that comes to your mind is a country where there is Taliban, war, terrorist attacks, killing every day. That's one angle of Afghanistan image. There is the other angle, there is the other image. Afghanistan is a country of relationship and values. It has been in the war for over 30 years now. If it was any other country involved in conflicts and war for 30 years, you had real children in the street, or real street children. You had women who had nobody to take care of them. But because of all these family values and relationship, we don't have street children as such, or we don't have homeless women. We do take care of our family members, extended family members, when we are in a better situation and we are not. I think that's one of the value of the relationship and family. When I travel abroad, even working in Afghanistan, I have a lot of extended family that takes care of my children. If without them, without their support, I would not be the person I am. It's a country that is located in a very important location, connects Central Asia with South Asia. Right now, unfortunately, our important location is being used as our weakness. Our neighboring countries influence the situation. They try to, we are located in a bad neighborhood, so to say. We cannot change Afghanistan geography. We cannot move Afghanistan very close to Singapore. But what we have to do is we have to adjust ourselves with the regional politics. And we have to make sure that our neighboring countries also respect Afghanistan and its sovereignty. Hopefully we will change this weakness to a strength where it connects Afghanistan, Central Asia to South Asia and becomes a center point for business. The second thing is Afghanistan, the third thing actually, is a very young generation. We have 65% of Afghan society are youth, the young generation, that are not used. If you use them properly, motivate them, they could be agents of changes in their society. So these are like these are the images of Afghanistan. These are the potentials that I would like to use and represent that Afghanistan. People of Afghanistan are pro-change. They would like to see the change. But what you have heard is always a turban and a burqa. That's like the logo for Afghanistan. It's not the only slogan for Afghanistan. There is the other page of Afghanistan. And by the way, I haven't left my country at all. I have always lived in my country. Sometimes when I travel abroad, some people tell me, oh, because she lived in the United States or America or Europe or other countries, that's why she is different. I have lived in the most remote areas of Afghanistan. In fact, coming to your countries is my only opportunity being abroad. I have always been in my country, so I'm not coming from Europe to represent a different Afghan woman.
And that's true. I've always wondered why you did not leave Afghanistan. Even though, in the book, there were many times when your life was threatened and you almost got killed, and you just never were killed somehow. I think your belief is that it was saved for a purpose, and we want to find out a little bit more about that purpose. But yeah, she's never left Afghanistan, and that's an inspiration to me, really, that you stuck it out. And of course, now you are running for presidency, and that's in 2014. And 2014 is also an important year because I think the United States has said that they're going to be withdrawing their troops from Afghanistan. And I think you have said sometimes that it may be premature, and that you feel that if they leave, it is the women that may suffer as a result, because the women, their rights are the ones that will be compromised should the Taliban come back into power. Tell me, if that were really to happen, when the United States pulls their troops out, what do you, and the women are the ones that are going to suffer, what do you see as your unique role in that kind of a circumstance?
Well, in fact, just 2 days ago, before coming to here, we just launched a political coalition. And for the first time, this is one of the other firsts that you should add. For the first time, one of the political movements or coalitions or parties in Afghanistan is being led by a woman. One of the objectives of this political coalition called Movement for Change in Afghanistan is to avoid losing the gains we have had in the past 12 years, post-2014, because as you mentioned, 2014 is a critically important year for two reasons. First of all, we will have a political transition, which will be elections, and these elections are critically important for Afghanistan because the first time in our history, we don't know now who is going to be our president in 6 or 7 months' time. Usually there has been shift of power in Afghanistan either through military coup or through fighting, or we know who is going to be the president because their politics are being kind of pre-arranged. But for the first time we don't know who is going to be our president next year. So this is critically important for Afghanistan to make sure that this political transition happens. In the meantime, international community led by US might withdraw in 2014. So in any Afghan house, at least perhaps you will hear an average of 10 times per day talking about mentioned in 2014. For two reasons. One is because we're uncertain and there is a lot of concerns that once the international community leave, the same experiences of 1992 and 1996 when the Taliban and civil war began in Afghanistan might occur again, we might come to the situation where we have to start everything from scratch. So we are concerned, and the top issue for concern is women's rights, because this is something Taliban have been saying, that we want women Islamic rights. As a woman who have lived under Taliban, as a Muslim woman who lived under Taliban, I know what does that mean when they say women Islamic rights. Their interpretation of women Islamic rights is women deprivation from school, education, political and social participation, basically half human being. That's how they look at it. I would be very happy to see them change. I would be very happy that they come forward and say, okay, we want women to go to school, but maybe with an Islamic hijab. Or I want women to participate in politics with a condition. But they always been saying that, women Islamic rights, which I know what does that mean, giving my own and also my colleague's experience, who is also a member of parliament. We have both experienced how brutal that regime was. And they haven't come up and said that we are changed. We want kind of certain progress, because they need to adjust themselves with the progress of Afghan society as well. I mean, if they want to rule the country, they have to accept that the Afghan nation today is not Afghan nation 12 years back or 15 years back. They have progress. They have all the social media. If they see a woman is being beaten up in the street, they will just take the picture, put it on Twitter or Facebook, and the world will see. And there are many people with good hearts in the world who might show reaction, who might not like this brutal regimes. So I think Taliban, if they want to really rule, they should make it clear what they want. For the international community, I think, I have been saying this and I want to repeat this, that 2014 is not a realistic year. Although Afghans have been fighting for sovereignty and freedom, if you look at our history, it's full of fights and war for the sovereignty and freedom of Afghanistan. So we don't want another nation to come and take the security or occupy Afghanistan. But I think at this stage, Afghanistan really needs the assistance of the international community, given that our neighbors perhaps influence the situation. So it's for both international community interest and for our interest to stay in Afghanistan for some longer time.
And of course, I think everybody here, when we talk about the rights of women, your fear is that they will be compromised. As a woman leader in Afghanistan and as a presidential candidate in Afghanistan, what would be the priority for you when it comes to women's rights? What would be the first task that you set for yourself if you were to lead the country for women?
For women's rights, specifically, if I win, there is this law called the Law on Violence Against Women that I presented to the Parliament a few months ago, and it wasn't passed because the extreme figures stood against it. In that law, we banned forced marriage, early marriage, or child marriage. The conditions for multi-marriage are a bit strict. Beating of women is not anymore allowed. Physical and sexual abuse is a crime, according to this law. Women do have the right to access their property. Some of the things that we regard as part of our culture and we don't talk against them, while these are not, have got nothing to do with the religion, it's part of the culture and tradition. The first thing I will do, no matter in what position, perhaps we will get this law passed, because that's so important. Then the second thing is women economic access. I believe that if I had no access to freedom in economy or access to resources, it was so difficult for me to have social and political independence. Women access to capital is so low in Afghanistan. Still women are, majority, 99.something% women still use their husband's bank accounts. So I think for me would be to create jobs for women, to create opportunities and increase women access to resources, because that will lead to political and social independence as well. And promote women access to justice. In our Supreme Court, there are 9 members and there is no woman in that 9 members of Supreme Court. I would like to make sure that at least 1 or 2 women of the Supreme Court are women members of Supreme Court, so that we facilitate women access to justice?
I think the question that's on my mind now is, would be, how would you do it in a case where it is a male-dominated government and force has always been used in Afghanistan?
Well, I think unfortunately, it's also the mindset around the world. When I travel, it's our mindset also as a woman. We think that we cannot do it. How can we do it? It's not realistic. These are the questions I face every day. And I face them not only from Afghans, but I face them from our international friends and women. In the media when I speak, they say, how can you think it's realistic to be in a male-dominated country? It is just a mindset. If Pakistan was able to do it, which seem to be more conservative in terms of social structures, why not Afghanistan? It's not easy. In one of my interviews in the morning, I said it's like you put your forehead in a big rock every day if you work in Afghanistan for women and human rights or for political, higher positions. As a woman, it's just like you basically put your forehead in a big rock. So it's not easy. But we have to learn the skills of politics. Like our male colleagues, they do it. They do it nicely. They make compromises. They negotiate. We have to learn that as well. Because we have been so honest, we sometimes don't know, so honest to ourselves and to our audiences and to our voters. We just try to be ourselves and don't know how to play the game of politics. Sometimes I think we have to learn that game and play it the same way they do it with us.
Okay, and of course I know many of you have questions and I want to open that to the floor in just a bit, but as we started, talking about your daughters, I want to end by talking about your daughters as well. I know you have two young daughters and they are 14 and one is 15. The younger one, she wants to be president of Afghanistan. The older one wants to be a space engineer, and these are amazing ambitions that they have. Share with me also, I think whether having a daughter has strengthened your resolve for a better Afghanistan in the future, and what do you see, what is your vision for them?
It's an interesting trend because I lost my father when I was very young. So I was grown up as a kind of orphan child with no father. The same thing happened with my daughters. They also lost their father when they were very young. So we are both deprived of the kind of the father's love. I will leave it for them because they're very small. The younger one is a very political woman. She's like 14, but she travels with me to all villages and she never complains of the food or the water. She very much reintegrates with the society, and that's, I think, a sign of being a politician. She tells me that I want you to be a president because then people call me as a daughter of president. And then, in the future, once you're not president, people will vote for me as a daughter of ex-president. So she already kind of set up her legacy. My elder daughter is a more practical woman. They're both very tough. My elder daughter wants to be a space engineer. I want in Afghanistan that both my daughters and other hundreds and thousands of women and girls like my daughters are able to reach their objective and their wishes and dreams come true.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to throw this open to the floor. If you have any questions for Fawzia, please raise your hands. Kimini will come around. Okay, also I would like to acknowledge another woman in the room, and she is Nafiza Azimi. She's also a parliamentarian from Afghanistan, and she will also be able to answer some of your questions. Of course, Fawzia will translate. So we have two women maybe Nafiza, you stand up so that everyone can see.
Okay, I come from one of your neighbors,
India?
We have a great image of Afghan men and women from traditional times. Lots of stories in our literature about Afghans. One of the most famous being the Koofi by Rabindranath Tagore. My question to you is especially about the Taliban. I think many of us all over the world, women particularly, are very worried about the rise of the Taliban, the talk that Pakistan is going to have a meeting with them or whatever. Because it seems to me that their vision of Islam is very exclusionary. It's not the only vision of Islam. It doesn't seem to be the right one, at least as far as the status of women is concerned. But to them, as you say, it's almost like half of humanity needs to be pushed away. And you mentioned that now, at least there is social media, and if a woman is beaten publicly, people will put up pictures about it. But I think the world's experience with the Taliban under war, they didn't care about world things. We still remember Bamyan and others that were destroyed, which was heritage of Afghanistan. It didn't matter which religion you belonged to. So I think that is something that worries all of us, and I'm sure it must worry you. So I don't know how you feel about that. And I wonder if you would be able to talk about how strongly they seem to be coming back as a movement. I mean, very recently there was this Indian lady writer, American Afghan, who was assassinated because of what she had written. I don't know if you knew her, and I can't remember her name. But that kind of thing just makes the world feel very upset about it.
Yes. Well, India has been a great neighbor. We have a very close nation-to-nation tight relationship. And in fact, both of my daughters speak Hindi because they keep following Indian movies. So there is a great amount of interest. We have 5 flights per day from Kabul to Delhi. Many people go for treatment, they come, it's very easy to get the visa. So it's two nations relationship that nobody can separate it. It's not related to the governments. Even if the wrong politicians would like to divide the two nations, I think it will continue. So India has been a great supporter for Afghanistan, and we know that. When it comes to Taliban, according to different figures, 85% of Afghan population they don't like the return of Taliban. 85. The 15 remaining does not necessarily would like to see Taliban come back, but perhaps they are not happy with the current administration because of some wrongdoings, because of corruption, or because of lack of proper justice, etc. So that's how the public perspective is. Partly because of how they were kind of brutalizing when they were in government. I just gave a few examples. The Buddhas you mentioned, these are one of our kind of ancient historical identity that unfortunately they exploded. There are many other examples. So, I believe that if you want to really genocide, kill a nation, by killing individuals, you cannot kill a nation. But once you stop education on them, you basically kill the nation. That's what they did. They stopped one generation for 10 years out of education, especially the girls and women. And I think the parents in Afghanistan now, and everybody understands the value of education. So certainly, even in south part of the country, which is bordered with Pakistan, and it's more open border, cross border, in that part also there are mothers who would like to see their girls to go to school. There are fathers who would like, and they come to us asking for school building as the representative. And I tell them, why do you, and they tell me that if our daughters become as educated and productive as you all are in the parliament, we want a school for our girls. We are very happy for our daughters to become like you. She actually comes from the central Afghanistan, where is bordered with, she comes from Ghazni, it's bordered with Bamyan. She just came from that province in the morning before we were coming to Singapore in the evening. Allow me to let her talk a little bit about the Taliban in Afghanistan, because she we all were sacrifices of Taliban regime. در مورد حکومت طالبان و یک طالبان آمدن شد دوباره به قدرت به نظر شما آیا این ممکن است نیست؟ وضعیت چی خواهد شد اگر دوباره به قدرت بیان؟ شما با فارسی بگین ما به انگلیسی باشه.
بازگشت طالبان در افغانستان فکر میکنم که بر مردم افغانستان دیگر قابل قبول نیست و این امکان نداره در این نزدیکا که طالبان یک بار دیگر بر قدرت برسه و اگر بخواهند طالبان در افغانستان بیاید من فکر کنم یک حساسیت بسیار جدی از طرف تمام مردم افغانستان برای حکومت طالبان با وجود خواهد آمد.
I would like to thank you for your warm presence here. I think for when it comes to the Taliban regime return, I think there will be a huge social resilience from the public, from the people of Afghanistan against Taliban. So I don't think the Taliban come back to power with the same ideology and the same mentality that they had when they were ruling Afghanistan.
و هیچ وقت مردم افغانستان علاقه‌مندی ندارد که از این حکومت حمایت کنه و یک دستایی از این حکومت باشد. بنابراین ما خواهش میکنیم که کشورهایی که در افغانستان حاکم هستند و به خاطر همکاری آمدند این اجازه و این فرصت ندن بر اونا که یک بار دیگر در افغانستان بیاید و حکمرانی بکنند به خاطر از اینکه برای دنیا هم باید قابل قبول نباشه و بر مردم افغانستان هم قابل قبول نیست و اگر همچون حکومت در افغانستان بیاید و فکر کنم یک بار دیگر دهه افتاد در افغانستان و جنگ خانه به خانه و تنظیم ها و گروه هایی که در اونجا حاکم هستند و فکر کنم یک بار دیگر اینا به جوش میاید و یک جنگ داخلی در افغانستان حاکم میشن.
I hope that the international community led by the United States will keep this in mind, that the people of Afghanistan sensitivity towards what Taliban did is very high. If Taliban are brought to power, in a political settlement without respecting the values that we have gained in the past 11, 12 years, women's rights, democracy, freedom of speech, I think unfortunately in that case we will witness a civil war because if Taliban come to power, there will be groups that will oppose Taliban, there will be different groups that will oppose Taliban, so the civil war will emerge again. This is something certainly we would like to avoid.
Yeah, talking about that, the Taliban are definitely not going to be those that's going to sit down and talk or be voted in. They might actually just do it by force, which they have always done. How likely is that to happen when the US withdraws from Afghanistan next year?
That's one of the concerns. One of the concerns we have is political deal behind the curtains. We call it behind the curtains political deal, where the public is not aware of what's going to happen. In fact, when the Qatar office in Qatar for Taliban was established, not many of us knew. So there was a huge reaction from the public that we don't want this office because it gives legitimacy to Taliban to have an office in such a wealthy country, almost. We don't know where the Taliban disappeared from Qatar, but I'm glad that at least the office is not actively open there. I don't think that actually we will go to where we had to start, like to 1996 in terms of bringing Taliban back to power, because the public doesn't accept it anymore. And I think the United States also understand that giving the country back to extremism and radicalism means basically we put the world security at risk. Because the security in Afghanistan is the security for the world. We have experienced and we remember the 11th September attack. So I'm sure that the world understands that, and I hope that they understand it, especially the United States. They keep their engagement and involvement in Afghanistan.
Questions?
You said your mother was almost a deputy for your father. That means he must have had an open mind towards women.
My father, it's a very difficult definition of my father. My father, I was 3 years old when he was killed. So I don't personally know how he was. I know he was very strong. When he came to our village, the whole village was preparing, so I know he was somebody very important and strong. It was a different definition back then. Definition of love and connection was different. So because he loved my mother the most, my mother was one of the wives that received most beating and violence because they were so close, and a small mistake, other wives were out of my father's eyes, you know. So because my mother was so close, and she was like the chef in the family, she was cooking, etc. So even if a small mistake by my mother, the return was more beating. So my father never allowed his daughters to go to school, although he established the first school in our village. But I'm sure if he was now alive, he would have been kind of maybe happy and proud to see his daughters in politics.
A lot of men must have changed their opinions about girls, for the girls to go forward.
They have. As I said before, for the same community where my father never allowed his daughters, as somebody who established the first school in our village, even my brothers, sometimes my mothers were resistant to send their son to school. But now for the same communities, people come to me, the maid, asking for girls' school. In fact, like maybe 10 days ago, I put the cornerstone of a school for girls. So the perspectives are changing. People more know. When I first started politics, like 7 years ago, in the whole village there was no female teacher. In the whole village, district, we call it district. Like in 50,000 population, there was no girl teacher. Now we have 25 female teachers only in my own district. So things are changing, but change of perspective is not a one-day thing. You have to really sacrifice, you have to really put your time, you have to be patient, and you have to be strong to accept or to push for changes.
Any more questions?
Hi, I think for both Fawzia and Hadiza, the question is, you talk about running for elections next year, and obviously you've got a very uphill battle. And my curiosity is, how do you plan to prepare for this election? And I'd like your views on it, as well as Nadiza's views on it, in terms of how she sees it. And I'm not going to say if, but when you are elected as president, you were asked about what you would do for women, but what would be that first change you would make, and not necessarily for women, that you think would be most important for Afghanistan to start moving in the direction you see the future going to?
I will translate your question first to her. سوالی که اینا داشتن از من و از شما، سوال از شما این بود که شما چی فکر میکنید در مورد یک زن رئیس جمهور شدن در افغانستان و اینکه چی آمادگی‌های زن‌ها و چی مشکلاتی زن‌ها در انتخابات دارند؟
در رابطه با رئیس جمهور شدن زن در افغانستان، در این قانون اساسی افغانستان به صراحت تبعیض بین زن و مرد قائل نشده، یعنی هیچ تبعیض وجود نداره. هر کس میتونه چی زن باشه چی مرد باشه خود کاندید بکنه. ولی چالش‌هایش که هست در قدم اول من فکر کنم ناامنی است که یگانه دلیلی است که حضور خانم‌ها پای صندوق رای و حضورشان به خاطر تبلیغات کمپاین انتخاباتی یک چالش است که من فکر میکنم به این مواجه خواهد بود. در غیر از کدام مشکلی نخواهد بود، شاید هم با دیگر رقیبان با مبارزات انتخاباتی با جرأت‌تر ناکار کنند.
The Afghan constitution does not discriminate between men and women when it comes to the election. So both men and women could participate in the election. But I think for women there is more security challenges and lack of financial means. So that is the two elements that stops women from or prevents women to compete in the election equally. That includes the presidential election as well. The presidential election will be more difficult because of security problems, personal security for the MPs. I'm preparing well. I have now my own answer. I'm preparing well. I And when I say people, it's not like the whole Afghan people, my supporters, which are the progressive part of Afghanistan. But I also have supporters among the conservatives. You know, sometimes the conservatives are also politicized, you know. So different groups use them for their kind of interests. And I also, as I said before, we also need to learn the skill. So I'm playing the same game that some of my male opponents are playing. Sometimes it's interesting because they pay for these religious scholars to go in the mosques and talk against me. So sometimes I have to do the same thing. But I have to also find the means, because if they're doing it, as a woman they're attacking me, talking about how bad it is for women to be in the politics, especially when she's like half covered, they are not Muslim, when they travel outside the country, they are not Muslim. And I'm using the same thing, because those opponents that they talk against me, their family members are abroad, they're living abroad. So I'm telling them, if being abroad means you're not a Muslim, so why do you allow their families to go abroad? That means it's politics. I'm doing the same thing. So I try to also create my supporters among the conservatives as well. My main challenge at this point is security, as she mentioned, personal security, because I'm one of those that almost every day get a warning letter, almost every day. It sometimes demoralizes you when you get a warning letter that, you know, there are 30 group of suicide bombers who would like to kill you, and how can you stop somebody who is ready to kill himself in order to kill you? It's so hard to stop them. And also, as she mentioned, women are not that economically empowered comparing to the man to compete. So for a man to win the election, maybe he needs $50 million. For a woman to become a president, maybe she needs $100 million, because then your challenges are double. But I have other sources, like I have my social media, I have my people, I have belief in myself, and I have a very strong and committed team that are working everything voluntarily.
Okay, this one first, and later we'll go to the other side.
I was wondering if your husband was a big supporter of women's rights in Afghanistan, and did he help with your campaign for president?
Was he a supporter?
Was he a supporter?
Yeah, he was really. When he was alive, he was the main support. He was very intellectual. He was a professor, and he was a big support. Without his support, I think I couldn't enter my social life.
Yeah, I remember, I think there are some questions at the end. We'll get some of them over to the other side. Yeah. Here as well, okay, we'll come to some guys, yeah, we'd like to hear from some men as well. I think I remember a scene in the book as well where he was taking care of your elder daughter while you were out campaigning and he was sick at the time, right? So I think the support from, her husband was very strong.
Hi, Fawzia. I'm Koofi from India. You spoke about the need to educate women in Afghanistan. Do you think that there needs to be some steps taken to also sensitize men in Afghanistan to accept women in the mainstream, because they sort of have been out of politics and all the major aspects of society? So do you think there's a need to sensitize men to sort of be more inclusive in that sense?
Exactly. I strongly believe in education for women and men, because if you educate a man, like the husband of the family, he will send his daughters and his wife or the rest of the women in the family to school. So it's so important to educate the man of the family equally. And sensitization is very important. Recently we adopted a law that our committee presented to the parliament that put a quota for women in higher education. 30% we have asked minimum for quota in higher education, and that means that we should simplify the procedures and the rules and the questions for women in the rural areas. And this was voted with super majority, absolute majority in the parliament, which is 249 members, 69 women, the rest are men. Media is playing an important role for sensitization and kind of trying to create awareness. But I think in those families, in those communities, we need to bring more religious scholars. Because if people hear from a religious scholar, they will accept it more. This is something we are doing. We have now started a campaign with religious scholars to bring, kind of put them in the front line for women's rights.
Okay, and talking about men, I think I'm going to get some men to ask some questions over here. Jesus.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming over here today. I think many of us realize how privileged we are to receive insightful views like yours. My main question was regarding next year's elections. You're saying that this is something that's being discussed a lot in Afghanistan. And obviously, Afghanistan and looking at other countries who try to establish the first round of elections has been a very big leap. And with this big leap comes the question of how you would ensure that such elections would be transparent, would be accessible to everyone. And I was wondering how the current government, or at least how Afghanistan would deal with this, whether they would lend a hand to the United Nations, potentially their Electoral Assistance Committee, whether or not Afghanistan, there were reports at least that many of the women will potentially not be able to vote, and correct me if I'm wrong, because in balloting periods you would have to separate between men and women, and there weren't enough women in security forces to allow the balloting for these women to proceed. So how is Afghanistan going to deal with these barriers, amongst others, and how do you see Afghanistan in the future as a more progressive country deal with the issues in the electoral process?
It's a very important question. In fact, transparency of the next year election is key to future stability, because if we have an election which as a government which has come out of a transparent or accepted to some extent by people of Afghanistan, because we cannot have an election like you have it in other developed countries. We need to have an election which is accepted by people of Afghanistan. If you have such an election, then the legitimacy of future government will be guaranteed, and it will lead to the stability in Afghanistan. But also, if there are elements now within the government, as you mentioned, that would like to fabricate the results of election for their own interest, that will, I guess, lead to another conflict in Afghanistan, because we would like to have election for a political smooth transition. On the women in election, unfortunately, in most of our areas, there have been fake voters on behalf of women, like they register on behalf of women as voters, and then during the election, the community elders, they come and they want to vote on behalf of women, which there is no actual voter. So as a result, in some of the insecure provinces like Kandahar, which is a province where Taliban first came from there, in female polling stations, you had more votes comparing to the men, which is not realistic. I mean, they were like used on behalf of women. In this election, women turnout in the registration is low. We have started a campaign in our committee, hopefully next week, so we will go to the provinces to promote women participation. We have recently signed a policy paper with the Election Commission in Afghanistan. We gave them specific advices on how they should promote women participation, actual voters, not fake participation of women. Like we asked them to go house-to-house campaign, make a polling station in the places where there are like a living area, so that there is no need for more security, like a polling station in a school, for instance, so that everybody can come, especially women. They don't have to make it in a place where the woman cannot go. So basic steps. We have advised the Election Commission. United Nations covered the expenses, but I hope that they have allocate more money for agents, for those who monitor the election. And the people of Afghanistan also have a role to play. Given the fact that I mentioned the social media, they could report if they see any evidence. But I think international community should focus more on transparency, because that is one of the chances. If we don't success the future election in 2014, we will certainly lose, and the price will be very high.
Okay. We have one more gentleman, and we see someone on the other side.
Thank you. Given how important religion is in Afghan politics and in politics in South Asia,
I think, can you hear? No.
better? No? Given how important religion is in politics in South Asia and especially in Afghanistan, and given the conception of Islam as a religion which is often oppressive towards women in the Western world, how important do you think is the role of religion in guaranteeing that the position of women in Afghanistan is continued to maintain in a much higher regard than it is now?
Unfortunately, usually religion has been used against women anywhere in the world. There is a mix of interpretation of culture with Islam. Most of our politicians, they mix tradition and culture with actual Islam. And they see that as a means of kind of keeping their power. So I think as we go towards more awareness and a modern society where there is an actual understanding of actual religion, you can basically give more freedom to the woman. If we open up to the world, I think we will open to the woman as well.
Okay, we can take a few more questions. Any questions? Oh, yes, okay.
Hello. I wanted to find out, we hear a lot about the oppression of women in Afghanistan and the disadvantages they face. I wanted to find out if there are any, can you hear us?
If there are any advantages that you feel you have as a female in politics in Afghanistan as opposed to the disadvantages?
In politics, no. But sometimes, being a woman, there is kind of, it used to be more, there used to be more love and protection by the family members as a woman. There seemed to be more respect in the old days in Afghanistan for women. Right now we have we're in the middle of social transition, where we have lost our original values. Now we are going towards more kind of openness and modernization and globalization. So in some cities we are in the middle of this, and it's very difficult because you lose your values, original values, where there was more respect for women, more kind of protection system for women, and the protection towards the family and woman was very strong. Now we're in the middle of that. One of the things that I think, I don't know how you regard it, but one of the things that women have, and it has been misinterpreted in some of by some of those who comment about Islam, is the rights to property. Originally in Islam, women have the rights to property 50% from their parents, and then 25% from the husband, plus that they don't have to contribute in the expenses of the family if they wish to. So I think this is one of the privilege that women could. But traditionally, we don't keep the property because we don't want to make our brothers upset and the father upset, and so you know. In politics, it's always hard. It's one of the things that recently they did was in Afghan constitution is they put reserve seats for women in the parliament, so quota system. Like if you get less votes, you are still elected as a woman comparing to the man. That is, I think, a privilege because most of my sisters in the parliament, they came on reserve seats. I come in both election on open competition. I was able to defeat my other competitors, but most of my friends in the parliament, they come through reserve seats. So I think that's a privilege, which Afghanistan is ranking number 22 country in the world by having more female politicians in the parliament. So that's, I think, something very good.
Okay, we have a question there and a question there. These two first. Question here? You have to listen. Oops.
Hi, my question is about generational divide as opposed to gender. So we focused on gender a lot, which makes sense given the background. You also mentioned transparency and the use of social media. It's not strictly speaking true, but social media is more often used by the young. So if you are the younger generations, and you mentioned that there would be problems with the election if it wasn't transparent. In Afghanistan, is the younger generation of men, wherever you cut young, and I don't know how to do that, also more supportive of this openness, or is it really, you talked about the younger women having different perspectives, and some of the men, but if you look at the gender divide, at the age divide, is the whole generation coming up a bit more open, or if you still got very heavily sort of Taliban-centric kind of views amongst young men?
It's interesting because it's like a 3-generation divide. The first generation is the very liberal Afghanistan. And then the second generation is the generation that were before the war, like 40, 45 years of old. And they seem to be more supportive for women. But the new generation, because they have grown up under Taliban regime, I feel sometimes that they are more, sometimes, not all of them, that they are more kind of in the trend of conservatism. It's the result of the Taliban regime. But they all use social media. When it comes to the women issues, they seem to be more, I easily can work with them. I don't have a problem working with them because I feel more comfortable working with them. And they listen to me, and all my team is young generation, like age 25 to 35, they're all in my team. But sometimes I feel like they want to protect the woman, and the means of protection is for a woman to wear burqa. You see, like they want their mothers to wear burqa, for instance. So that is, I think, the impact of Taliban regime, because they spend a good year of their age, good years of their age under Taliban and civil war, like 10 years almost Taliban regime, and how many years of civil war? Chances? 6-7 years of. In total, almost 17 years since the fall of Taliban, the capture of Taliban up to now. So a young boy, when he was 10 years old, now he's, 27 years old. He has grown up with all of this mixed kind of contradictory views from two extremes. The extreme of the left, very left of the communist regime, and then the extreme of very, very right during Taliban regime. So they are in the middle of two contradictory views. And I see sometimes the impact of that regime. But still, comparing to the Taliban and comparing to the extremism, they are the generation that you could work, and they're pro-changes. Like all of my Facebook, Twitter supporters are young generation.
And Fawzia is on Twitter, by the way.
And I use it myself. Facebook I don't operate, but Twitter is.
Yeah, she replies quite quickly. Can I get to her first, because she's raised her hand for a while? Yeah. Yes. Would you be able to just speak? Yeah, if we can hear you then.
As a South Asian, I'm also from India, I have observed that there is an enormous gap between the rights of women in the, let me say, richer strata of society and the poorer section of society. And often what happens is, it's very difficult to understand what somebody else is going through because you're not going through it yourself, and often people will come back and say, this doesn't happen in my country. And as a result, there are fewer people who speak up for the people who are really, having to face the inequality. So I wanted your comments with respect to Afghanistan there.
Well, Afghanistan is also very divided society. Right now, the richer are becoming rich and the poorer are becoming more poor, unfortunately. But the level of violence doesn't divide. Like domestic violence exists with the poor families and with rich families. Perhaps the form of it is different. In rich families, more kind of divorce happen. In poor families, more physical abuse happen. Because rich families, they have more education, etc. So if they don't like, they divorce. But in poor families, sometimes women come to me from the poor families who, the whole body, you cannot find a small piece of skin which is natural because they're being beaten up. I see them almost every day, they come to me. They're usually from the poor families. So this kind of division is unfortunately increasing the social division. This is something we didn't have before. But I think majority of Afghan society are in the middle kind of class, majority, We don't have such poor that they live and sleep in the streets. Because as I said before, we have this family system, protection system, who take care of, we feel responsible to take care of, but with the open market that has come in Afghanistan post-2001, we start like building more rich people, and then the disparity is getting more and more.
Assalamualaikum. Okay, I just would like to ask one question, one simple question. Who is your favorite leader that inspires you where you are now? Yes, sir. Thank you.
There are many world leaders that inspire me. When I was very young, I was I was very young, little younger than my friend. When I could see Indira Gandhi on TV, I was really impressed, because how could a woman lead a country and stand in front of the man? I couldn't imagine. But I think now most of the world leaders, Nelson Mandela, Hillary Clinton, they're all my heroes.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you.
Hi, so since English isn't an everyday conversational language in Afghanistan, I was wondering if you could share with us how was your early exposure to the English language like?
Well, right now many people speak English in Afghanistan, especially in bigger cities, but still it's not a common language. We have two national languages, which is Farsi and Pashto. So English is not commonly speaking in Afghanistan. I first learned it in a very difficult situation. In a situation where there was rocket attacks, as you could see in my book, rockets were coming all over, and I was going to the English class, and my mother was like, if this English class makes you president, I don't want you to be president. Because sometimes I would go to the class under very difficult, the war was going on, but I didn't want to miss my class, and my mother was not happy, and so she would wear the burqa and come to the station, because it was too late in the evening, like 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, so she would come to the station and tell me, and the whole family was against me when I was going, including my mother sometimes. But I followed that, and then I started teaching English to other girls during Taliban. So that also helped me to promote English. Now my students that were with me, they were all in very high positions within the government, because they were almost doctors and teachers that were coming to English. So English is now a language of, they call it language of money in Afghanistan.
Talking about mother and, can I just tell people?
Talking about mother and English language, I know you wanted to study to be a doctor, and but your mother has mentioned this thing about president a few times. How much is your decision to be a president influenced by your mother?
My mother always regarded me as somebody who is very unique and special. And I think that's very important. We need to give our children this vision of within themselves. And once they grow up, they think that I'm very special, so I need to do special thing and I need to change. And I was always to my mother's standard. Like my brothers didn't want me to go to school, but I was always in the first position in school. So there was no reason for them to tell me you shouldn't go to school. And my mother, despite the fact that she wasn't happy when I was born, but she always told me that you will become something. When you grow up, you will become something. And that's something, because I never know what that something means, but I always want to be something, So I think that's very important when you give our children, especially the girls' children, this understanding that they're so special for us, and they will be so special for everybody, because they will grow up with this sense of being very special and unique.
Do we still have time for questions? Where's Midi? You should run here. We still have some time for questions? Okay, yeah, question here? And after that, we'll go to you, yeah?
This is a rather personal question for you and your partner here. You mentioned how your mother made you feel very special. You were brought up in a country where a lot of things that many people consider unfair were happening to women. What is it that you and your friend, or when is it that you and your friend felt this is not right, despite the fact that it was happening to you and many others? And when is it that you felt I have to do something about it, even if it's against everybody else?
این یک سوال از قیمه دارن ما باشم گفتم با خطی مادر همیشه برای ما میگه توی کاری میشی یا چیز خواهد شدی و می احساس برای من وجود داشت که من یک چیزی باید شاید چون مادر میگه برای من میگفت و آدم با می احساس غرور کلام میشن میگه غیر از اینکه مادر کن دیگه میگه با شما میگه چی وقت بود که شما احساس کردین که باید در سیاست بگیم و یک کاری متفاوت انجام بدیم من میگم برای شما تو فکر کنی سرش باید برای شما جواب بده well for me since I was born as a child and I could feel when my father was killed and Mujahideen wanted to take over our district and kill my mother so we had to run away to go to where the government was ruling so we ran and my elderly sister was also with me she was afraid that perhaps the Mujahideen will come and perhaps something wrong will happen they will rape her or etc they were afraid of that because those things were commonly happening and I couldn't run because I was only 3-4 years old so my sister asked my mother that why don't you throw her to the river so that we could run but my mother picked me and then she held me and then we ran together I still remember that and I still remember in my village when this happened, it's very close to the river. Each time I go with some ministers or some parliamentarians, I tell them that this is a place where my sister is a parliamentarian. She is also a parliamentarian. She's a parliamentarian from a different province. She was elected in the second election. I campaigned for her and then she was elected. So whenever I go past that road, I still remember that sense of being kind of. But perhaps if I was a boy, I could have been the future of the family, so my sister will not say so. But because I was a girl, I was nobody. So my sister said so. Since the time I was born, I felt the discrimination, like many of us do, including my sister, including my mother, till the time that the Taliban came. And in fact, during the Taliban, which I could see basic things, they interfere, like you shouldn't wear white socks, for instance. You cannot have nail polish and long nails and nail polish because it's against this. That's how their interpretation was. You cannot have music in their wedding. Those kind of basic. You cannot go to school because it's anti-Islamic. Why? The first verse that came to our Prophet, peace be upon him, was Iqra, means read and write. Read. So the first verse was about reading and writing. Why Taliban deprived women from education? That gave me more determination that I should come to politics, but there was no opportunity. So in 2001, when the international troops came to Afghanistan, then I decided to do something different. But maybe my friend.
تشکر از سوال شما. من خودم زمانی که درس می‌خواندم در عرصه سیاسی و خیلی زیاد بلد نبودم ولی به من علاقه‌مندی داشتم باید یک کسی شوم که به مشکلات مردم رسیدگی بکنم تا بالاخره شرایط جنگ‌های داخلی آمده ما در ولایت خود در مسجد درون درخته به حیث معلم اونجا تدریس میکردم بازم یک قسمتی از مشکلات مردم مثلا رسیدگی به اولادهای مردم درس دادن ایران فکر میکردم که یک زمینه هست که میتونم یک قسمت از مشکلات مردم خود حل کنم بازم به می فکر بودم و به این فکر میکردم که این اندازه هم کافی نیست مبارزه میکردم اگر نابسامانی یا بی‌عدالتی در خود اداره دولت در خود اداره اما مکتب هم به وجود می آمد من اختشاش میکردم سر صدا میکردم تحصیل میکردم استادان نمیگذاشتم که به مکتب برند به صنفا برند تا هم حقوقشان درشان به شکل درست رسیدگی شود داده شود تا بالاخره شرایط حکومت انتقالی آمد و بعد از حکومت انتقالی باز حکومت انتخابی آمد و یک فرصت و یک شرایطی بوده که از این فرصت نتوانستم در انتخابات دور اول اشتراک بکنم که البته چون کارهای اجتماعی در خود ولسوالی زیاد انجام داده بودم در مؤسسات در انجوها در جلسات و سیمینارهایی که از طرف مرکز با ولسوالی ها می‌آمد من خودم از طرف مکتب به اونجا معرفی می‌شدم و معرفت در بین مردم زیاد پیدا کردم در هر جلسه سر صدا و گپ‌های مردم هم می‌گفتم این باعث از این شده بود که در انتخابات اول من خود کاندید بکنم شورای ولایتی بالاترین رأی را البته در سطح افغانستان از من بوده تا 18,000 رأی بود تا بالاخره در دوم انتخابات توانستم در پارلمان را پیدا بکنم و این یگانه خاص ما بود که در دل ما بود و همیشه پیش خدا دعا میکردم که باید یک چیزی شود ولی این در ذهن نبود که یعنی یک چیز چی تا بالاخره امروز در این جایی رسیدیم که آرزو و خواست ما برآورده داشتیم.
Very briefly, when I was in school as a volunteer student, I was doing most of the volunteer work and kind of trying to change anything that was wrong in school. When I became a teacher during the Civil War, I always mobilized teachers, female teachers, because there was always discrimination in our school against female teachers. So I always mobilized them, and sometimes we would protest, like we would not go to the classes if something wrong happened. From there I started my leadership, and then in 2001 when the international troops came, I nominated myself as a provincial candidate, a provincial member. So I won a lot of votes all over Afghanistan, like 18,000 votes as a member of provincial council in my province. And then in 2010 election, I participated in the parliamentary election.
I have a very simple question. Is today all young girls and women who go to schools and colleges in Afghanistan, do they go freely without fearing for their lives and without fearing that there will be a backlash from fundamental groups of Afghan society?
No, they don't go without fear. There is unfortunately fear of suicide bombing, the fear of Taliban return, fear of extreme figure becoming more stronger and stop them from the progress. So there is a lot of concern and uncertainty. But still, with all of that, there is a lot of young girls in universities. In fact, 3 days ago, some days ago, I can't remember when exactly, in the last few days, one of the university awarded our committee with a appreciation award, and they invited us to the committee, to the university. I went like hundreds of young girls in the university. I was so happy because for me it's a generation change, honestly. We were very few when we were going to university. Now I see all universities, including private ones, are full of young girls. With all the threats of social problems, you know, it's not easy. Your neighbors will say something that she has broken the taboo, she is going to school. The Taliban might return. So sometimes we hear this message from our fellow parliamentarian, like, Ms. Koofi, your friends will leave Afghanistan, and then we know how to deal with women issues in Afghanistan. That's a joke, but that's a sign of how they feel about women issues. So it's not easy. Things have become more difficult for women because most of the conservative elements think that Taliban will come back, international community will leave, so we have to adapt ourselves with new situation. They think that they should adopt themselves with new situation. It's more difficult.
Thank you.
Well,
I think we can take one more question. I think some of you would want to be able to meet with her after, so we're going to leave some time for that. So maybe we can take one question, one last question.
Hello, I'm Shadula.
Okay.
I'm from India, and the question is, what is the percentage of women voted to the men voter in next elections that we are facing? And do you think that economic issue, industrial issues, ability to get funds in Afghanistan also matter? Means how would you place? Would the women's issue weigh more than the economic issue in the next elections?
The percentage, unfortunately, is low now. In the previous elections, they got their legitimacy by 45% of women's votes. It was 45%. But now that there is more re-registration of voters, so far 27% of the total re-registered ones. The people who lost their cards or they're now eligible, they became 18 years old now, they are 27%, which is low. That's something we would like to, as I said before, start the campaign. In the next election, one of the issues that perhaps will attract attention and candidates will talk about would be women issue, because we presented this law on violence against women and it wasn't approved. I'm sure this will become a matter of discussion for candidates. Economy and also withdrawal. 2014 withdrawal of the foreign troops. will be one of the issues that, which are interlinked, you know. If international community leaves without leaving something behind concrete to make sure that we don't reverse, women issue will also be affected. So will be economy. So they are interlinked issues, but I think majority issue for discussion will be the impact of withdrawal in 2014.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to ask you one last question. All of us seated here, we're all in Singapore, and we're probably from around the world. What can we do to support, what you are doing in Afghanistan?
First of all, I must thank all of you for your patience and presence here. I think it's a global village. We have universal values and universal principles. We cannot have double standards. Like, we cannot say women in Singapore or United States have all the rights to go to school, but women in Afghanistan don't have that right because it's Afghanistan. So I think you should, I ask your support for education and also for my candidacy. So that's key. If we have women in the leadership position, then you can have women education and women in economic aspects as well.
Thank you. And of course, seeing democracy and seeing human rights flourish in Afghanistan is something that you live for, and it's something that you're also willing to die for. And with that, all of us wish you all the best in your presidential campaign, and we just want to thank you for joining us today.